Welcome to the Let's Talk About It podcast. And today I'm really excited to talk to Murray Heber, who has a background in neuroscience and sports. Welcome to the podcast, Murray.
Well, thank you for having me here. This is great. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about your background, because you come from an applied neuroscience background, but also sports. And most neuroscience comes from the lab. So how did you move from the track to focusing on the mind?
I guess sort of it just evolved into the neuroscience aspect, coming from, I guess we're going to go way back then. I was a track and field athlete, and it was a series of injuries that kept me out of my goals of going to the Olympics.
Right.
And things didn't really seem to add up. I was getting the best care, the best therapy, the best strength and conditioning that was available, but I still kept having these pain points that was limiting my capacity to train at its max. And then eventually when injury shut me down, then I got curious as to, okay, well, how do I solve this problem?
Right.
That took me on the course of strength and conditioning. So I thought, okay, we can build the bigger, stronger, more resilient athlete. That will fix the answer. And then it got part of the way there. Then it's like, okay, well, then you can start to see how movement isn't quite accurate, even though if they have the capacity to. There can be some blocks in their physical ability to execute at their best. So I got into chiropractic, made to be able to go through there and use my thumbs and acupuncture needles and optimize these ranges of motion and the muscle firing patterns. Then I found that was actually a nice big step forward, because then you have the strength and conditioning aspect of it. Now they can access all of it, but all of a sudden sometimes they would access it and other times they wouldn't access it all their best.
So,
okay,
let me jump in there as well. So you went from, I like the phrase of broken bodies to broken brains.
Yeah.
So at what point did you move from the physical to the mental?
I guess it was a gradual shift. So in terms of timeline wise, probably just over a decade ago, or yeah, maybe a bit more than that. But it was this gradual shift, because then it started looking into our unconscious control of our movements and our movement execution. And I've always been on the side of it, of the performance augmentation. So how do we push the limits of what's possible? So not only dealing with the broken aspect and getting it out of broken, but also how do we make it just as good as possible and keep it there as long as possible.
Yes.
So that's what led into now having to learn about the unconscious. That's what opened the door for the applied neuroscience component to it. So it's been about a decade-long journey of getting in and surrounding myself by those who know a whole lot more about it than I do, and learning from them, and then applying it into primarily these sports settings, both in a individual setting and then also in like team or group aspects as well.
Right. Awesome. So in terms of your sports, so your physical injuries prevented you getting to the Olympics? Is that what you're saying?
That would have been my trajectory. Yeah, I was
wow.
Like I was on that sort of right course and trajectory. I had some national titles, on my belt by that time, and I was still probably 18, 19 years old. So I had a good chunk of time ahead of me. But yeah,
but that must have really got into your head space around, okay, here's my trajectory, and now I'm constrained physically. So that was a shift mentally as well.
Absolutely, yeah, because that was, for that time was like a long time of my life. That was my goal, was to go and compete in the Olympics for track and field. And then when that was taken away, I had this big gap. And I always find whenever things don't quite line up or add up, then that's just sort of something switches in me going like, I got to figure this out. Like, why is it not connecting? And then so these pieces also start to connect. It's like, aha, there it is. So I've always been on this sort of road of discovery to try and connect all these pieces to help, again, support that peak performance.
Interesting. And so then when you wanted to get into that peak performance and doing the research, where did you go to? How did you start unpacking this problem?
I guess the big sort of shift would have actually been, I was doing a lecture series actually on the East Coast of the United States at some colleges, universities. And I think we just finished up at Georgetown, and the Major League Baseball Strength and Conditioning Conference just happened to be going on in DC at the same time. So just stopped by there just to hang out and see who was around, and just got into a conversation with a group. And then as one person was listening to me as I'm talking about our movements and the unconscious sort of driving factors, looking at more like a habit of movement, and how even like the best athletes on the planet, they'll still go through and they'll still, from perfect, they'll still drift into bad habits of movement. They never set out to pick them up, but something is driving it there.
Yes.
So that's what I was looking into. And then this guy tapped me on the shoulder and he said, this is interesting. I haven't heard anybody speaking of movement execution as a habit. I said, that's how I view it as well. And I said, I was a retired Navy SEAL, but I was in charge of the flow program for the SEALs.
Right.
I was like, this is interesting. It's like, tell me about flow states. And I had never heard that term before for being in the zone, locked in where you can do no wrong. And as soon as he mentioned it, I was like, oh, okay, now I understand what it is. And like, yes, this is what I'm looking for. But it seemed at that time, flow states, if most everybody's experienced one at a time, they can be a micro flow state or a macro flow state. Those macro ones are almost like you're in the Matrix. You have bullet time, and times when you see things whizzing by really slowly. So those are these macro states that take place, but they seem to be so elusive that they sort of happened as out of the blue, like magic struck.
Yeah,
and then you don't really go and want to chase that because it just seems so rare that it just sort of happened. So, but at that time, this was now the right way where now they were looking into it, like the Navy SEALs and this retired SEAL that I met. And now neuroscience imaging started to advance enough to actually understand what's going on. So now they actually pulled in the science behind what's happening in these states and to try now, we got to sort of move that forward in terms of applying it into the real world execution.
Okay. So just to unpack a couple of things you mentioned there as well, before we get into the flow state and what it means to people in business, you mentioned about the movement and how people will build up, I heard, bad habits around movement because you're continuing to do things. It's these it's almost like a golf swing. The micro adjustment on a golf swing will mean you hit a hole-in-one versus in the bunker.
Yeah.
So talk to me more about that habit stacking of a movement and how it applied to maybe a business owner.
I guess it gets into the way our brains want to work. They're driven to conserve energy. Right. So if we're functioning at peak capacity all the time, then it's going to go through there and just be too draining, too consuming. So it always wants to cut corners. And same thing for physical like movement and execution. If there's an easier way to accomplish it, may not be the best biomechanical way, but it might be less energy requiring.
Yes.
So it will slowly sort of drift towards this lower state of pure performance. So hence the bad habit that you have to go through there and break. And so it works from essentially the cognitive standpoint, trying to drive and save energy and cut corners whenever it can. Essentially wants to be as lazy as possible to conserve energy.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting because I think a lot of people see efficiency as sometimes as laziness because they want to say, okay, I'm going to do the minimum to get this done, this product delivered, this report complete, this meeting finished. But I'm hearing that's actually your brain trying to conserve your energy. So how do you move from that efficiency to then the best performance and doing better?
That's an interesting one, actually, because the efficiency, like the ease of doing something. So sometimes, not to tie too much into flow states, but when you're in that flow state, the execution feels effortless. It feels easy. Right. It's not lazy in terms of the brain's capacity. It's draining on the brain to be in those states all the time. But what we feel or perceive is ease. So so it can feel that way, but other times it is just sort of like, no, it is just actually trying to go through there and grind down. So it's more or less having to learn what these, I call them like symptoms are in the brain. Yes. And so you can identify, okay, is this now getting into more flow state, or is this now something else is driving it to conserve energy, to block, to not have to be more of a drain? Right.
So let's dig into that as well, because like you say, sometimes a lot of business leaders are running on caffeine and cortisol and the hustle. But you're saying that's not necessarily getting into the flow state. That just means they're busy.
Right.
So how do we distinguish between cortisol and caffeine versus the flow state?
I'd say the biggest one, again, to feel it and to experience it, would be when you're driven by cortisol, and it's usually cortisol too high of norepinephrine. That creates a bit more of it's a low level fight or flight sort of drive. So you're just driven to go, to do, to accomplish. And you can survive off that for a long time. It's a good source of fuel and energy, but it compounds over time. And so what ends up happening, that starts to go and like narrow our focus. So we get some cognitive rigidity. So essentially it's almost like being able to have problem solving, or that flexibility to find new solutions to problems that are in front of you starts to arise. So we find some of those symptoms, but really I try and describe it as, if you feel like you're being pushed forward to do and to accomplish and to achieve, that is usually cortisol and norepinephrine pushing you forward. Okay. It's an extrinsic drive to, okay, I got to get this done for this and this external reasons. Okay. And flow state is really heavy on more intrinsic drives. That's going to feel more like it's pulling you forward. That's like goal-directed behavior. That's dopamine and norepinephrine, which is getting you that focus, but it's not tunnel vision where you're blocking it out, but it's giving you that hyper focus on what's in front of you, and it pulls you forward. Okay. So if you feel you're being pulled forward, that's more of a flow state. Okay. And if you're being pushed, that's probably more likely you're in a cortisol, like this low level stress of do and accomplish.
Okay, so that helps, but let me unpack it a bit more just so I fully understand it. So when you're being pulled forward for a deadline or got to get this report out the door or a product delivered, that's more cortisol being pulled along.
Being pushed forward is cortisol.
Push forward.
Yeah.
Oh, push forward along. But then on the pull is where you don't notice that as much. You're driven towards it because you really want to achieve the outcome, regardless of time, output, or what anyone else is saying.
You got it.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So how does that work in practice for a business leader or a business owner? Because we are driven by serving others. We produce products, services, report to someone, typically the board. So there's all these external drivers. So how do we then get into the flow state around managing those expectations of others while getting into that flow state?
A lot of it comes down to, one, your awareness, and two is intention.
Okay.
So intention is huge.
Right.
Because if you have a deadline or something to do and accomplish and it's being put from external sources, that's usually going to go through there. And I mean, it can be still something to drive you forward or to pull you forward, but not as strong. Usually, especially in high pressure situations, you have lots to do. So for a lot of leaders and executives out there, it's going to turn more into, okay, I got to get this done, and I got this pressure, and it does almost feel good because you're just always moving, you're always busy, and doing accomplishing. That sort of feels like your natural state. So that's quite often what our brains want to go through and default to, because again, it's a good source of drive and motivation, but not sustainable over a long period of time.
No.
So I lost what was the second part of that question?
Yeah, so we're building into how does that apply to a business environment where you're not driven. We're serving customers, serving someone and delivering something, but how do we get into the flow state when we know we've got those external drivers?
Right. So then, that's back to the intention. So becoming aware of, what you're sort of choosing, what's driving you. Right. And if it is this, cortisol and norepinephrine and you thrive on that, then becoming aware of that, but then just changing the intention as to, okay, I have these external goals and things I have to accomplish. But then within that, if you have an intention of, okay, how do I just get curious, essentially? How do I accomplish this? Or how can I do this? Or how can I make this happen?
Okay.
As soon as you do that, now you're setting sort of micro goals or goals for you to go after in your own process. That makes it intrinsic motivation. Your brain wants to do it now. That's what pulls you forward. So really goes through there. You can be externally look exactly the same, but how you go about accomplishing it from a sort of brain neurochemicals and brainwave states that are floating around. Yeah, it's going to feel different because it's going to pull you forward. It's going to feel more effortless versus this, constant grind and push.
Okay. So how I would take that is if a lot of people are in back-to-back meetings, they're running between rooms or Zoom meetings or whatever, but that is that pause. Set intentions before you start that task, activity, whatever it is, to say, potentially, how could I do this differently? Or how could I achieve that result in a different way? Or what's a different way of achieving it? So then that would get you into that flow state.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. It doesn't necessarily, it's not guaranteed to go and get you the flow state, but it creates the environment for it more likely to happen.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Because I always like the 3 M's for going into any sort of big speaking or big client presentations or big meetings where you talk about music, movement, and mindset. So music to get you pumped up and reset in terms of whatever gets you energized. The movement is just walking around or just air squats on the point on the spot just to get your blood flowing. And then the mindset is the intentions. How do I want this meeting to go? How do I want this presentation to finish up? What do I want to feel coming out of it? So it sounds a little bit similar to that, but then there's a next layer on to actually get you into flow state.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So then how do we take that intentions and then actually check that we're in flow state during the activity? Because you might start well, but then suddenly you get a call or you see an email pop up or a notification or something. Not that you should, because you had them turned off, of course. But if you do and you get distracted, how do you reset that flow state as you're going into the activity?
Okay, there's a few things for that some are mechanical, like you said, like you get distracted by an email, a phone call, somebody knocks on your door. Those are, to try and now set the environment to minimize those.
Right.
Because the one nice little saying is that flow follows focus. So if you can't focus, you're not going to find flow.
Right.
It's just, pretty much guaranteed not to happen. So it doesn't have to be a massive amount of focus. It doesn't have to be, hours worth of it. It's just enough to start that cascade of neurochemicals and brainwaves to get you into that point and hold you there long enough to until you sort of cross the threshold.
Right.
Because there's like a lead in, and there's always this window of like resistance to getting into a flow state. And then after that, when you get into it, it's like, there we go. So if you're back to actually the movement component, if you're a runner, a lot of times this is described as the runner's high.
Right. Yes.
So you start out for the run, then there's going to be resistance like, oh gosh, this feels harder than normal. But if you can cross through that, you get your second wind or you get into that runner's high.
Yes.
And that's more or less the same type of thing that's happening in the brain when it comes to this effort to trying to get into the flow state. You're going to have a similar sensation as to what's going on.
Okay, interesting. So if someone hasn't experienced it that much, because I know a lot of people, and myself included sometimes, I'm just focused on the deliverable, get it done. And if anything, I'm fighting against the flow state because I'm more focused on the tick box checklist as opposed to the flow state of enjoying the journey. And I do that sometimes, but not as often as I'd like. So how do you get into that runner's high more often?
I guess, you said the tick box checklist. That actually can be one of those tools for it.
Okay.
Again, with the right intention, the right mindset, sort of going into it. Because if you go through and you stack a few things which you want to go and accomplish today, now you just set yourself a goal.
Right.
And the brain loves goal-directed behavior. So it wants to achieve those things.
Okay.
So as soon as you go in and you actually accomplish one and check it off, then it's like, oh, that was good. Do it again.
Yes.
So it starts to do this whole thing. So that actually is one way to start to pull you through and into it.
Okay.
If you go into it with more the dread, like, okay, I got to get this done, or I should get this done. That is a block to getting to flow, because that's external. So now you're doing it for an external reason as opposed to something intrinsic to pull you along the way.
Okay. So just to unpack that one a little bit. So if I truly am not, if I'm doing something that just doesn't excite me, it could be anything from creating a report that's just not interesting, or managing my team to do invoices, or something admin-y. Are you saying that you can change the mindset about how you approach that activity, whatever it is? Or are there certain activities you just shouldn't do because you just won't enjoy them?
Yeah, some are always going to be, stressful to do and to accomplish. If it's like, for a lot of people, it's like, oh yeah, I got to pay my taxes. I got to do my taxes. Oh, so if you do it that way, and so for this one, I like it. We should ourselves a lot, and when you should yourself, then it's a matter of you are trying to find a way not to do it.
Yes.
Or if you do it, then you're not fully there, not completely like focused on the task. It's going to take you forever. It's going to be so hard.
Right.
And it's going to just drag on.
Yes.
Whereas if you now change that mindset to, no, actually, I want to get my taxes done this weekend, so they're done and out of the way. So then from now on, I have a clear mindset and go out and do whatever I want to do on the weekends.
Right.
It's like, okay, so that small little tweak can go through there and help. So basically, don't should yourself. Find a way that, if this is off my plate, no matter how awful it is to accomplish it, it'd be so much better.
Okay.
And then in that task, go through there. If you can just get curious about something about it. Smallest little curiosity about, okay, how could I get a few of these lines done by 10 a.m.
Yes.
So also now that is your focus. It's not looking at this whole big thing to go and accomplish. It's just this one little piece. And then if you do that, it's like, okay, let's go through it. So that actually becomes your internal drive or your motivation is to do those things, not, do my taxes for the year. So it's not this big, huge thing to chunk off.
Okay. So it's a section of it as part of the checklist which gives you a dopamine hit.
You got it. Yeah.
Right. Perfect. So then the checklist, and then as you're going through it, okay, I'm going through this tax return, which I might find a different way to save tax later on because I'm getting more information about my tax situation. You're finding positives and different ways of doing it as well as a checklist. So, okay.
Okay, that's a neat, actually, little analogy. I like this story here. Because when you are in this cortisol, norepinephrine sort of push state, your pattern recognition goes down. You get this tunnel vision. So creative problem solving goes down. Decision making is harder and more stressful. So it just takes more time. Right. Yes. And the quality of your decision making isn't there. So if you find, in terms of finding a way to sort of save some money on some taxes, your creative thinking and pattern recognition isn't really online. Okay. So you're going to be looking so hard to try and do this and solve this. Whereas if you get more into a flow state doing it, then all of a sudden, oh yeah, this, oh right, this. So that's all of a sudden, like, everybody in the switch is like, all right, I just found this thing out of the blue, just popped into my head. Yes. That's a good sign that you are in the right cognitive state to bring this in, and which actually makes you accomplish it faster and isn't as arduous to plunge through.
Yeah. So a lot of business owners, business leaders I talk to have decision fatigue, that brain fog. And like you say, that's clearly not in flow state. So if they're in that state, how do they shift into that flow state?
I guess the first step I like to do is I guess, yeah, like assess what's going on. So if you, for you, if you think it's more of a brain fog versus where you just can't see clearly, versus like a decision fatigue, where
Right.
you just can't seem to make a decision, like you're just pinned. You
Yes.
feel like you've made too many,
Yes.
or you don't have the cognitive flexibility for problem solving.
Yeah.
So first is assess, okay, what is really going on, either causing the brain fog or decision fatigue or
Okay.
what it might be.
So they are different.
Yeah, they can.
Okay.
They're very similar in the
Okay.
sense of neurochemicals and brainwave state that's going on,
Mm.
but your intervention to get through it faster can be different.
Okay.
So for like a cognitive flexibility, so you just can't find the answers and solutions that are out there for you,
Yes.
and you have this feeling that that it shouldn't be this
Yes.
hard.
Yeah.
So for that one, it's a matter of you always got to do a pattern interrupts. Okay, we got to just stop what's going on right now.
Mhm.
And then for this one, now you're looking again more for this pattern recognition. So this, broad, far lateral thinking type of idea. So a great way to do that is, if you can, if you're like in an office tower where you are, look out your window.
Okay.
And if you see skyscrapers or you see out into vastness, just take a moment and get curious or wonder about any little thing. You see a bird flying by, just anything to sort of stop that pattern, because now your mind will be able to wander a little bit. So it's actually going to make you get out of this tunnel vision and so start to break that apart. When we look
Okay.
up at a night sky or in the mountains, then we do get more anandamide. That's a neurochemical that's released that is really
Say that
good
again?
for anandamide.
Anandamide. Okay.
That is really good for
Okay.
pattern recognition. So that helps out for that creative problem solving component to it.
So literally just taking your mind off a screen and looking at something in the distance, ideally in nature or ideally something bigger outside,
Yeah.
will create that anandamide,
Yeah.
which creates more decision-making capability.
Right, because it starts to
Okay.
go through and those things together help to lower the norepinephrine, and some of the cortisol can be a little bit longer to get in place.
Yes.
But at least stops that cycle of where they're dominating the conversation in the brain. And so as soon as you can pause that, then when you get back to it, if you can put now some kind of a goal or get curious about what you're trying to do, or start to throw wild and crazy, like far-flung ideas out there, knowing that isn't the answer.
Okay.
But it's actually just get wild with it, throw some different things out there, because now that sort of creates some extremes and gets you out of this tunnel vision. And
Okay.
then it's like,
Interesting.
okay, so now I can actually go and start to pull some different stuff together. And usually when you're getting, throwing, almost, I like to say exaggerate to illustrate. So when you start to throw these big, huge, exaggerated things out there, well, yeah, we know it's not that far off, but now all of a sudden you have more clarity on everything else that's within those big, broad boundaries, as opposed to here you're trying to push outside of it. That's hard to think outside your box when your box is being compressed in by neurochemicals.
Yeah, I love that, because you mentioned a couple of things around when you said you think you know the answer, you think it should be easy to make a decision, but you just can't. You just trapped in analysis paralysis. And then it's the exaggerate to illustrate phrase, which then makes you think bigger, wild, wacky, crazy ideas of which something might pull a thread, and then you can actually apply that to the situation.
Yeah.
Okay. So back to the taxes analogy, the get stuck in the taxes, collecting the receipts or getting the invoicing done. You think, okay, how do I just automate this entire process? How do I make this whole thing go away? And that might create somewhat little process that makes it easier to do. And then you tick that off your box, which gives you more of a result as well.
Yeah, you got it. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, love that. That's cool. And so then talking back to the, I just want to go back to the athletes and business owners, because you mentioned around it's the runner's high. So what do athletes do that business leaders, entrepreneurs, enterprise people don't, that would get them more into the flow state more often?
What do they do? I guess they have a clearer timeline in terms of their goals and expectations.
Okay.
In the sense of, if they have a game, they have a training session, they have all these objective numbers to go through there and follow and chase.
Right.
So it can be a little bit easier for them to I guess set their own goals or targets towards those really clear objective numbers. And the other part of it too, there's usually competitions or challenges. And to get into flow, one of the easy things that really get us there is this challenge sort of sweet spot where you have enough skill for the task, and the challenge is where you're at or just slightly exceeds it.
Okay.
Because then it's like, okay, I can show up for this.
Yeah.
If it's too much, then all of a sudden brains is like, okay, yeah, no, I'm not there. Even no matter how hard you're trying, it just doesn't show up with all of its faculties to be able to go and perform.
Yes.
And at the same time, if it's too low, then doesn't perceive it as enough of a challenge. So it's kind of, being lazy and sitting in the back seat going like, okay, yeah, well, this will just figure itself out along the way. So lots of times they're spending more time in that challenge skill sweet spot
Okay.
to pull them into that thing. And like for a team flow aspect, they like this one for sports, because a lot of people have seen this where you have a really, really high ranked team and they go on to play one of the lower ranked teams in the league.
Or maybe the same league. I was watching the Flames versus Dallas Stars the other night, and they got trounced. So it was a fun game, but nonetheless, it was a big loss for Flames. But so similar,
Yeah,
they're in a situation.
So sometimes for the higher ranked team, it can be one of their hardest games to just be accurate and to perform at their best in, because again, like unconsciously, they're going to perceive it as a low challenge.
Easy, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So but an athlete that I've never seen one that would go through and actually consciously think this and not show up and try harder, take it seriously. No, they're there to win, to perform their best every single day. But when the unconscious is driving a lot of this and it doesn't really show up, then that can just be they're on their heels for the first period until they figure it out. And then they can either change the strategy so they now create some own internal challenge to raise their internal challenge because the external challenge isn't there, or if the other team comes through there and they can present the challenge, then they can come and meet it. So
so back to the brain being efficient, you don't want to let it be the most efficient it could be in that game, because then you're going to not perform. So you want to get in that flow state.
Right, exactly. Yes. Yeah, and then for the lower ranked team, sometimes they have a come through their amazing game. It's because for them they have the skills to win that game, and the challenge now is there. So it's like, okay, like they can win this. So again, it's not a change where they go into it like consciously thinking about it. It's just the unconscious is driving so much of our actions and behaviors.
Yes.
That what we're consciously aware of is so small. So this is where we got to work with. We got to take what our conscious can do, but more or less program our unconscious to do all that heavy lifting for us.
So I'll play that back, because when we talk about athletes versus business leaders, you mentioned a couple of things. One is around that they're measuring. They have a target, a goal to meet every day, so they can see the incremental performance improving or not, and then adjust as needed. And then the second thing was having, I'm going to call them micro challenges. So they're setting themselves, how can I do a little bit better in this session or this training or this game, rather than try and win a gold tomorrow. It's the micro improvements.
You got it.
So if I'm applying that to a business lens, when I'm dealing with a client or presenting or working with someone, a great example at the moment is around communication. A lot of people tend to over talk and over explain, and one of the best ways to do that is to pause, have longer pauses between their points. So one of those incremental little challenges might be, I'm going to talk less, slower, and have more pauses in my conversation in my next meeting. So they're trying to improve micro every day.
Yeah. No, that's excellent, because that now sets that micro goal of pause longer.
Yeah.
And it might feel like an eternity, but then that's your switch. Like, okay, that felt too long.
Yeah.
It's okay. Then just carry through. So then you're going to be rewarded for the attempt to do that.
To build it up.
And that's one thing I'll deviate here a little bit. For goal-directed behavior, where a lot of this works is that you get rewarded for like the step or the effort towards that goal, not necessarily for the attainment of it.
Okay.
If you do attain it, awesome, great. You get flooded with the dopamine and the right neurochemicals. But even just go through and take a step towards it, it's like, oh, that was good. Do it again. So that's where having these goals is great, and that just sets the unconscious towards doing it. So you know how you can leave your conscious thinking, problem solving, more free to actually do that work.
Right. So recognizing the progress you're making in the task rather than the end of the task itself.
Yes.
And working through it.
So actually, that's another one too.
Okay.
For in a lot of sport, there's a lot more immediate feedback loops. So you just see your results right away.
Yes.
And the one I like to give for this analogy is if you're out and hitting golf balls at the driving range, and you're doing it at pitch black, midnight, you don't see where a single ball goes. So you hit a bucket of balls, and all of a sudden you go back the next day, you look where they all landed. It's like, okay, you go back that night, hit another bucket of balls. Like, it'll take you forever to make any real improvements because your feedback loop is too long.
Yes.
So what actually happens, you're there, you see where it goes, you make micro adjustments, you see where it goes. That is how you learn and accomplish and move through things faster. So in business, a lot of times it's a matter of there aren't those built-in quick feedback loops. So it's now saying whatever your business, whatever is in front of you, how can you create some of these feedback loops that then give you the way, okay, I'm on the right track, or I need to course correct.
Yeah. So let's expand that. So what have you seen around those micro feedback loops that apply in business? Because sports is easier. I remember playing football in the UK, or soccer as they call it over here. And with your teammates, if you make a bad pass or a bad tackle or miss goal, you get feedback from your teammates very quickly,
Yeah.
immediately, and it's usually pretty abusive.
Yeah.
But in business, it's obviously different. So yes, you might get some feedback, but how would it apply just running through a day of meetings, meeting clients, or working on products?
Yeah, it depends on if you are leading or managing a team where you have
Mm.
these larger objectives versus if it's now you yourself and your own intrinsic
Right.
goals.
Yes.
But it's the same thing, sort of set these little goals. And if you have it so that it's, did you do it or attempt to do it? Yes, no. If there's this ambiguity into it, that's hard. Like, I'm going to try a little harder. Well, did you? Kind of, but I'm not too sure. Then the brain doesn't get on board with it.
Yeah.
So if you have those little micro goals that did you do it or not? Yes, no. That's your feedback loop.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's how you know you're going on the right course, and then you can course correct as you move forward. And also that has helped to now keep pulling you forward to go on to the next and go on to the next and go on to the next.
So I'm hearing a lot more resilience on internal recognition of the goals rather than looking for external validation,
Right.
because you're not always going to get the feedback. You're not going to get the recognition you expect or deserve sometimes, but it's yourself recognizing the progress you're making. Is that a fair reflection on that?
Yeah, I
Is
guess
it-
more or less. Yeah, because
Yeah.
sometimes that external goal is very valuable to go
Yes.
and strive towards winning the Stanley Cup. That's
Right.
huge.
Yes.
Right. So having that is still very valuable. But then this is where it comes into when you actually achieve that. And so for a lot of, especially, founders, entrepreneurs, when they go through and they have their big exit, or athletes when they retire,
Yes.
it
Yeah.
gets into the, oh, now what? Like, there's just crickets.
Yeah.
They don't know what to do. Like, where do they go? And that's where things can either break down in the sense of your brain is still looking for these drivers, that's something to do. So it's looking for the dopamine, it's looking for this, these neurochemicals, and then it can sometimes lead into these, I call them like maladaptive behaviors, where you find it from external sources that's not coming from, again, driven from within towards some goal or some accomplishment you're striving for.
Right. So how would, in the business though, an exit could be years away. So how would someone running their business or a business leader leading a team, how do they capture those micro goals in a day or in a week?
I guess if we looked at it and you had a goal of going to climb Mount Everest, and you're not currently a massive mountaineer or any of that.
Yes.
So that might be years down the
Yes.
road.
Yeah.
But then as you break it down, you start to look at it, it's like, okay, well then I have to hit a certain benchmarks as to go, I got to have a certain amount of VO2 max fitness level. Okay, how do I achieve that?
Yes.
I have to figure out, how do I get to Mount Everest?
Yes.
How do I book time? So you doing those things gets you one step closer.
Right. Okay.
So just breaking it down to all those little steps that, okay, yes, you did this research onto it. Yes, you did this workout to increase your VO2 max. Okay, you got enough sleep to recover to do the next thing. Yes, you ate the right meal today to do. So that's where it comes like effortlessly into every choice you make is leading you towards that goal.
Yes.
And that's where having these check-ins along the way, which usually you have to intentionally make them. This is where like every quarter having these check-ins is good.
Yep.
And so you just sit there every quarter, you stop, you pause, you look, hey, did we make this meaningful progress towards this that we thought? Did we start to drift off to a different direction? And then how do we course correct?
Right.
So that's a pretty easy one. Just every quarter, just build it in and have a look at it.
Yeah. So in a business translation, what I take from that is having a roadmap, which could be 6 months, a year, 2 years out, but more importantly, having milestones along the way every quarter, or maybe different frequencies, depending if there's a specific milestone for a specific project delivery. So if you're launching a new product or building a business, you might have a milestone around number of people hired, or a revenue target, or number of products to market, or number of people performance reviews completed. It's setting those milestones along the roadmap journey.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Especially if they can be tied into you took steps towards it. Yes, no.
Right.
I
Yes.
suppose
Each
the
day.
ambiguity, in there is just sort of the death of focus, or opportunities, the death of
Right.
focus. And then if you have all this sort of vastness out there, then you're not going to be able to find those flow states, because you can go here, you can drift, you can be all over the place.
Yeah. So it reminds me of my business coach once told me about 100% clarity, 100% focus, 100% of the time on your business goals. So that's every day, every morning. What are your business goals? The end result of that roadmap. How am I am I 100% clear on how to achieve it? And am I 100% focused on doing that every day? So it's not just bits of emails or meetings or presentations. It's everything has to work towards that goal.
Right.
And the check-in every day is, did I do that today?
Mm-hmm.
And if not, what can I do tomorrow to pick up the pace, to refocus on that goal? So just having those daily check-ins as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's nice at the end of the day to sort of sit back and look, at your day and don't be, hard on yourself, because life happens and you can have external factors that give you cognitive loads, more things on your mind. So it's going to be more like grinding all the time, not very efficient.
Yes.
That's all right. But hey,
Yeah.
did you get towards there? And if not, how do you, again, what could you do tomorrow to, again, get the unconscious to do more? It has so much horsepower that when we get it to do the work, it just lets off your conscious effort. Like, oh, that is hard. That is draining. That doesn't have a long life to it. Where at the beginning, if I can use another sport analogy, when you're young athlete, then all you can do is train more, train harder, train every day, because you don't have that repertoire you've built of strength and skill and practice behind you.
Yes.
So the more you do, the better you get. So now this can almost turn into this grind mentality. So then at some point, though, it's going to have to switch into the, train smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
Nobody tells you when that is.
No.
It's just like, oh, today, start training smarter. So we have to stop. And at some point, you're going to realize that it's just going to be like an aha moment where it's like, oh, right, how do I do this in terms of the smarter sense? Now you can, like, the best thing you can do is take capacity or leverage the capacity you have built up over all those years and get that to do the work.
Right.
So when you have this sort of whatever the business industry that you're in, you have the expertise in that. You've logged tons of hours in this problem solving. So that's what you've built up. So if you keep the grind going, then that is just training harder all the time, which depletes your energy, depletes your resources. So it's like, okay, stop, flip it, let all of that do the work and push you forward from that sort of healthy standpoint.
Yeah, I love that. You mentioned something that triggered a reminder me around letting your unconscious mind work for you. And I think back to when people have mentioned the shower moment. You're in the shower and you suddenly get that idea, that solution. And someone once said to me, and I'd be interested if you've heard this as well, someone once said to me, asking yourself questions before you go to sleep can sometimes have your unconscious brain work on it overnight. So by the morning or the next day or sometime, it might pop up with the answer. Back to the recognize your wins today, and then how can I be better tomorrow? Doing that towards the end of the day when you're about to near bedtime will sometimes have your unconscious mind work on that. Have you heard this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. And
Yes.
the more you can practice it, then all of a sudden you'll come up with these solutions out of nowhere.
Right.
Yeah.
So get your brain, your unconscious brain working for you rather than trying to grind to get the answer.
Yeah. And so that's, I think, one of those early recognition signs is when you feel like you are just grinding harder than it ought to be.
Okay.
Because if you're grinding hard and you feel like you're moving at light speed, that's good. Keep going.
Yes.
But if you're grinding hard and feel like you're just not getting anywhere, you're stuck in mud and hard to get that traction, that's where you say, okay, this is where we got to do the pause. And then grinding more is only going to rob you of that effort.
Right.
Like our willpower is it's a limited resource and it does drain throughout the day. And also it drains over the course of time.
Yes.
So in the morning, the beginning of the day is when we have the most willpower. The more decisions we have to make, the more things we got to do, that goes through and starts to drain that resource. So that's where, you see some executives, they only wear the same blue jeans and black t-shirt every single day.
You don't have to think.
Wait, one less decision to make.
Yeah.
So that's where a lot of that comes from. But then if you have you're draining that resource every single day over the course of weeks, months, even years, that's what can eventually lead to just the burnout, which is now kind of like, flatlined, and it's hard to claw out of that. And, for many business owners who've been there, that's where you can almost see that end coming. And you're just tired. You're going through the motions knowing that it's probably not going to work out.
Right.
So that's a matter of like, hey, realizing as early as possible to make that right intervention to now keep yourself sort of out of that downward spiral.
Yes. So let's put a cap on all this in terms of the flow state. What are the benefits and advantages and the wins you've seen of people who get into the flow state and the achievements they've made as a result of doing this consistently?
Exponential growth and performance.
Okay.
And when you get the right neurochemicals going, so when you get into a flow state, you can be performing up to sort of at 5 times your sort of everyday capacity. So if you stack that day after day after day after day, that's exponential growth. And it's hard to comprehend exponential growth So again, one little example is if I gave you a penny a day for 30 days, you'd have 30 cents.
Right.
If I gave you a penny, then doubled it every day, well,
Mm.
after 2 weeks, you'd have about $160.
Yeah.
After the month, you'd have 5 million.
Yes.
It's like that doesn't compute.
Yeah.
But that's what is possible when you can find these flow states more regularly.
Mm.
And then on the other side of it, when you're actually stuck in this stress response, well, now from a neurobiological standpoint, the dendrites in your prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for a lot of our executive functioning and thinking,
Mm.
they actually start to shrink and contract. You don't have as many connections. So our ability to problem solve actually goes down, which usually
Okay.
when you have these deadlines, that creates more stress because you're not more pressed for time. And so that is going to go through and have them retract even more. And so you get
Yes.
into this downward spiral. So that's all of a sudden where, one goes exponentially and the other one actually is not just hanging neutral. It actually starts to grind lower and lower.
Oh, so it's actually worse for you, health, mental well-being, everything.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. So I'm hearing 5x performance every day, which can compound exponentially.
Mm-hmm.
Bit like that analogy of I can't remember the fable of the farmer who the king promises him a reward, and he said, I'll have a grain of rice for every square on the chessboard.
Mm-hmm.
And so you double it on each chessboard square, and then by the end of the chessboard square, you've got so much rice that it's an exponential growth. So
You got
like the
it, yeah.
compound interest. Love that. So let's bring it back to you. And you founded this Flow Factory, and you're using AI and the headset. So where do you see this going in the next 2 to 3 years?
Getting to the point of scalability. So now this can be utilized by everybody because it can be just driven by your phone
Right.
or tablet, computer, what have you. And you can get a built-in feedback loop. So either the headphones or there's getting to a lot of commercial EEG. So that's your brainwave reading devices.
Yeah.
Muse is one that's sort of like a headband one.
Yeah.
When you can go through now, get these brainwave states. And when it's talking to the app, which is going to go basically act as a bit of like a flow coach. So it just, through communication with it, it helps pull out these micro goals and challenges within yourself.
Okay.
So instead of you have to sit there and try to think and create them, and thinking is slow and it can be arduous and it can be draining your willpower.
Yes.
So now there's a simple communication piece. You can go through and just help out every single day to start that day. So okay, good, here's my runway, and away you go. So that's sort of the goal of it, is to have this capacity out there. And AI has been an amazing tool to be able to learn and remember you and your strong flow triggers, which might be different than somebody else's. And you might be very risk tolerant. So having big risk can be a massive flow trigger. Other people, they take a big risk, then they sort of shut down, they wall off. So when it can learn these flow triggers, it gets smarter and more able to communicate with you to your triggers to get the best likelihood of you getting into flow state more often.
Interesting. I'm doing some work around Claude Cowork at the moment, and using that on to my own PC and laptop and files. What you're talking about is actually almost applying Cowork, but to your brain, in terms of let it process for you and come up with some suggestions.
Essentially, because it just makes it to unload more things, so that this can actually be that tool that just, you have a quick little 2-minute interaction with it.
Yeah.
That almost unknowingly you're setting these goals in front of you.
That's both scary and exciting, and I'm more excited by it. It's because it's going to uncover and surface some things that I would never have thought of. So love that.
It's the some of the tests with it, they're pretty cool. It's kind of like it can learn you a bit faster than you know or you want it to.
Yeah, that's cool. No, I'm excited for your journey as well. Okay, so just to wrap this up, I'd like to just finish on 3 questions. So the first one is, what is the biggest flow killer?
The biggest flow killer in business or overall?
I'd say in business.
In business? Okay.
Yes.
I'd say it is this, I'd say should. It's when all of a sudden you're finding this should, because that's not you wanting to do it. That's not you pulling forward to it. And then you're never going to find flow when you are shoulding yourself to do this, to accomplish this and move that forward. So in terms of, that's not a good descriptor example, but it's like when you feel yourself or you wear yourself saying, oh, I should get this done. That right there is, you're not going to find flow.
Okay. And then counter that with something like, okay, what can I learn from this, or what can I explore differently, or what was the other phrase you had around the the extra to the insight.
The exaggerate to illustrate.
Yes, yes. So is that a good way to counteract that?
Yeah, I like to leverage curiosity. So first of all, out of that should one, if you carry on with that, then it's okay, I want to or I don't want to.
Okay.
Simple. And if you don't want to, then great, don't do it. Oh, great, that's no. Let it off the brain. It's okay, I want to get this done for whatever reason. Perfect. It's still going to be hard. You still don't really want to do it.
Yes.
But you decided that you're going to tackle it. And then you go through and get curious about one aspect of it. And then that's going to go through there, and that's going to set these little micro goals. It's going to build, and then now you start to stack these things together. And if you can do it in a bit of a new way, or you take a bit of a challenge to stretch your ability to do it, I'm going to get this many performance reviews done by this time.
Right.
Then all of a sudden, okay, now you're stacking flow trigger upon flow trigger upon flow trigger. And next thing you know, is you're being pulled towards accomplishing this.
Right. Love it. A little bit like the Pomodoro technique of where you do 25 minutes of focus, then deliberately take a break for 5 minutes, then carry on with another 25. I find that really good for focus because you've got a deadline of time to do it. But to your point, making sure I'm curious about it rather than just doing it because I should do 25 minutes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love
yeah.
that.
So curious, what can I accomplish? Or set those little things ahead of time. And another part too that I found a lot of leaders have got caught in a bit of a trap too, which is when you're in a flow state, you just keep going and going and going. And it's so just like you want to do it. To keep moving through it because you're just, firing all cylinders. It's actually a good time after whatever block of time, if it's an hour that you're in this, big flow state, or it's 25 minutes, is actually, pause. Take that break when you're kind of at the peak. Because then when you come back and you want to get back into it, is quicker for you to get back up there. Whereas if you ride the wave and you start to turn out and you drain your resources down here, then it's okay when you want to come back to it. That's a big mountain to climb.
Oh, interesting as well. Because I do sometimes get into the flow state with my book. I'm writing a book at the moment, and I set myself a goal of 25 minutes or 40 minutes, depending on how. And sometimes I'm going for 50 minutes or 55, and I'm in a good flow state. But I'll carry on.
Yeah.
But then to your point, it's no, that's a good time to break to then come back to it.
Yeah, and you'll know your own capacity to it. And so you know, it's okay if you stretch it for 65 minutes, maybe that's too much, you start to drift down. Because then when you come back, it's like, oh yeah, it's hard to get that momentum going again.
It is.
But if you stop at the top, and that was your
45,
50 minutes, and that's your sort of say peak window, then when you come back, notice it the next time, it'll be like quicker for you to get back up there again. Like, oh, right, this is what I was going on. This is what I was thinking. It'll trigger more of those thoughts faster and quicker.
Okay, love that. Okay, so let's get on to question 2. So question 2 is, what's the one book that changed how you think about performance?
The one book? That's a great one. There's been a lot. I guess one of the earlier ones that I read would have been Stealing Fire by Stephen Kotler.
Okay.
It talks a bit about flow states and what it looks like, pulling it in from the extreme athlete side of it. So he tells a really good story as to the process of learning about flow states and how these sort of extreme or adventure athletes, their progression rates were exponential versus a lot of other sports were just sort of moving along at a steady state.
Okay.
So what was going on with that? So then I like learning through external stories because then it's all like, oh, right, this is what it looks like. Then you can sort of learn as to how does it apply to me? How am I doing this in my day where I'm not doing this?
Yeah.
So that was one of the first ones that sort of gave me a bit more context around all of these pieces.
Okay.
And then on that note too, that's where I went and actually filmed this documentary called Flow that was all about this. And I actually went through there and interviewed Stephen Kotler, and it's built very similarly to that book.
Okay.
So we have a lot of the same Navy SEALs, in there. We have the adventure athletes that are now talking about flow states and how they get into it, how their approach is for it. So it just tells these different stories of how to get there.
Interesting. So Stephen Kotler, and the name of the book was?
Stealing Fire.
Stealing Fire. Yeah. Love that. Okay, awesome. And third question, of course, is if we want to keep learning and want to find out more about you, where can we go?
The best part right now is actually so my website, the flowfactory.ai, is still based around a lot of my sport side of it. Yeah. So basically just going through there and fire me off an email. So that's just murray@theflowfactory.ai, and then just go through and get in touch and have some of those communications. That's sort of the best way to go and get more of that information until I sort of get more of this built out for the corporate side of it.
Awesome. Yeah. Love that. But this has been great. I've learned a lot, and it's opened my eyes to some different ways of thinking. So really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks for having me. This was fun.
Good stuff.